Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to discuss December Solstice 2025. It's known as Ayananta in Sanskrit, and this is going to include actually looking forward at the next 6 months, which is a period called Uttarayana. The talk is from Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. Just to note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. So, some announcements and orientation, especially for those who are new to the channel. So, I'm offering a level 1 introductory Vedic astrology course in January. So that's going to start January 14th. It's for 12 weeks on Wednesday evenings, New York time, and that's all going to be on Zoom. If you're interested in that and want an application, the deadline to apply is January 7th. So email heartlightask@yahoo.com for more information on that. Space is limited because this is going to be a small group, and also no astrology experience is needed to join the group. Also, auto dubbing is available on this channel in all these languages listed here, and there's some new ones, Dutch, Polish, and Korean. Excuse me, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists so that videos are easy to find. So this type of video is going to be in my Gochara transits playlist. So all my solstice videos and moon phase videos and monthly transit videos are going to be in my Gochara transits list. There are other playlists as well. Also, if you'd like to look at learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts of people, places, and moments in time, you can check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video, where I list most of the videos I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. I update that video every spring, so again, the ones from this year since April, I don't think are on that list, but they'll be included when I update the list in April 2026. So some of the newest videos I've posted, in case you missed any: planetary transits or Gochar for December 2025, Chandra nakshatra or the Golden Warrior Star, and the new moon or Amavasya that happened a couple days ago, 19th December 2025. Also, if you're new to Vedic astrology and really want a good foundation to start learning or to get more of talks like this, I've listed some videos at the bottom of the slide that I feel are probably the first foundational videos I would start with to really get set there. Okay, so as I mentioned, solstice, December solstice, it's winter solstice where I am. I live pretty close to New York. It's a very pivotal time. So it's mostly an astronomical moment when the sun is switching from its closest or location to the South Pole, and it's starting to move north. So Uttarayana means in the northward direction. And especially in Vedic astrology, Uttarayana, so the 6 months following the December solstice, are considered to be very auspicious. Okay. Regardless of where you are in the world. So even if it's summer solstice for you, in the southern hemisphere. What I was going to do is look at, this moment in time, and then March equinox, and then June solstice. So we see how the energy is progressing over the next 6 months. And then after that, I'm going to look specifically at the December solstice 2025 chart to get into more detail there. Okay. What I have on this slide are 3 charts from December 2025, March 2026, and then June 2026. Now, the thing is, if you notice, all of these charts are oriented towards to being an Aries rising or Mesha Lagna. Mesha Lagna is Sanskrit for Aries rising. Okay, so if you're new to all this, I use North Indian style charts in my work. So if you look at the first chart, actually any of the charts, if you look at the first chart though, the top diamond in the middle, it's got the AS at the top, that stands for ascendant, and in the bottom corner there's a little 1. Okay, so that little one in the bottom corner refers to Aries, which is the first constellation of the zodiac. So that one in the bottom corner does not designate the first house, even though it is the first house. It designates the first constellation of the zodiac, Aries, or Mage in Sanskrit. To get to the other houses, you count counterclockwise or up and to the left. So if you go to the upper left, there's an upside down triangle. There's a little two in the bottom corner. That's the second house. Now, again, that little two refers to the second constellation of the zodiac, which is Taurus or Vrishaba in Sanskrit. Okay. And then you go all the way through the 12 houses that way. So with all these three charts, what I have as I've oriented them all to Aries rising or Mesha Lagna. The reason being is that Aries rising charts, or Aries rising in general, if you're looking at collective energy, that's the chart you want to use, because the first constellation of the zodiac in the first house basically gives you a birth chart for the whole world or all of humanity. So I'm looking at collective energy here. And then we'll see how the sky pattern is shifting here in the next 6 months. Okay, so if we focus on the first chart here, December solstice 2025, the actual time, again, this is the chart I've posted here is not the actual time, but the actual time is December 21st, 2025, 10:03 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, these are all Aries or Mesha Lugna charts here. So the day lord for this moment in time is the sun. And that's a big deal. I mean, we're literally talking about, the solstice here. So big changes in the sun cycle, right? It's almost like the sun's return. And depending on where you are in the world, again, if you're dealing with a winter solstice, you can kind of identify winter solstice as like true midnight for annual year or the solar year. Or, again, if you're if it's summer solstice for you, then it would be high noon. Okay, the opposite. But the sun is really important because, again, it's literally the, kind of center of our universe, and helps things grow like plants and then, thereby animals and that sort of thing. And, dictates, our circadian rhythms and all this sort of thing. But it's also the center of astrology because a lot of things gain or lose power based on their relationship with the sun and how much light they reflect from the sun, at least from the Vedic astrology point of view. Sun also is, again, a core for anybody's chart. It represents the soul, it represents the health, it represents purpose. Things like career, which again, most people spend more time on their career than almost any other part of their life. Um, and it also represents leadership, especially executive leadership, like president, king, head of state. Okay, so right off the bat here, we're looking at leadership of some kind. And the other thing about that is that you can see sun is in the ninth house. So there's this big, I circled it here. There are 4 planets in the ninth house here: Moon, Mars, Sun, and Venus. So the ninth house represents authority. So again, we're doubling up, doubling down on this notion of leadership of some kind. Okay. The other thing about the sun, this particular sun, is when you have sun in the ninth house, that can indicate problems with the sun. Okay, it's called a Nasha. So it seems like it would be a good thing. You've got the planet representing leadership in the, house, related to authority and leadership, and that sounds like a good thing. But it's almost like there's too much energy there. It can cause problems. Not necessarily, with somebody. It can be that they have problems with their father, because sun also represents father. But it could represent problems with authority in general. The other thing is that the relationship with the father or authority might be great, actually. It might just be that there are chronic problems with father or authority of some kind, or even government. Okay, so it's like maybe they have health issues or financial issues or that sort of thing. Okay, so there's some problem with leadership here. Okay, starting off. Now the dasha period, and this is the planetary period. Hold on a second here. Okay, so I just wanted to add some things to my notes before I forgot. So anyway, the dasha period is Venus, Saturn, Sun, Mercury. So the dasha period, if you're not familiar, is a planetary period. And when we look at dasha periods in Vedic astrology, we're essentially looking for timing. Okay. And the dasha period indicates planets you can consider more active or influential at a particular time. So we've got Venus, Saturn, Sun, and Mercury. Okay. And Venus and Sun are in this, ninth house here with the four planets. So we actually call that four planets together like that a pravraja yoga. Yoga is a planet, usually a planet-based combination. It's a combination of some sort. And pravraja means that there's some sort of life focus here. So there's specifically a focus on authority, okay, and leadership. Um, and Venus is there as well. Venus relates to, relationships and love and social grace and that sort of thing. Venus happens to be combust during the time of the December solstice. So there may not be a lot of, you may not be seeing the love, maybe feeling the love, but not seeing the love. You might be distant from partners or relationships. There might be not a lot of social grace or compassion or diplomacy, and not as much as usual. I usually sort of joke that, when Venus goes combust, you usually get early, not so great customer service if there's a problem with things. Um, so that's on board. The other thing is Venus is the lord of the seventh house. So the seventh house relates to spouse-like partnerships, and the planet represents spouse. Seventh house also represents business partnerships, independent business, and way forward in life. Okay, and these planets, Sun and Venus, which again we're already picking up Sun because it's the day lord, but Sun is also in the Shah period. This is and all of these planets, Venus and Sun, and actually Mars as well, which is the other leadership planet. But Mars is more of a, if Sun is the president or king, Mars is more the CEO, like somebody who rolls up their sleeves and gets involved in the nitty-gritty details of things, like kind of on the front line type of leadership. Um, but anyway, those three planets are all in this nakshatra called Mula. Okay, so if you're not familiar, a nakshatra is also known as a lunar mansion. Lunar mansions are about 27 of them, and each one has a different energy and deity associated with them and that sort of thing. So Mula nakshatra is pretty intense. It's a unstable part of the sky, one of the most unstable parts of the sky, because there's a crossing over from Scorpio. It's the beginning part of Sagittarius, which is in the ninth house here. And Mula happens right after you cross from Scorpio to Sagittarius. So anytime you cross a sign that's unstable, we call it Sundi. So there are 12 different Sundi points in a chart anytime you cross a sign, okay? But there are 3 of those 12 Sundi points that are Gandanta points, and those are even more unstable because you're changing not only signs, but you're changing lunar mansions or nakshatras, so it's a doubly unstable point. So all of these planets here, Moon, Mars, Sun, Venus, have recently crossed through this like pretty tumultuous area of the sky. And Mula nakshatra is, uh, symbolized by a bunch of roots tied together. So something, deep, something underground, but something potentially that has growth. Now, potential growth, right? Because anytime you plant seeds, you can toss them in the soil, but you don't know. And actually, most seeds don't make it to the top of the soil. They have to. And there's also this very highly transformative energy, right? I mean, the seed has to sort of die to itself and transform and evolve and crack open, you know, um, and then, find its way, push its way through the soil to come up on top. And then hopefully there's enough nutrition in the soil and water and sun and everything else to actually help that, new seed grow. But again, most seeds don't make it that far, right? So again, a lot of instability, a lot of deep change, a lot of deep transformation. And of these 4 planets, Moon and Venus are the 2 emotional planets. Moon relates to the emotional mind, intuitive mind, and Venus relates to, again, heart-based things, love and compassion and all those, happy, warm, fuzzy feelings we have. And then Mars and Sun are the 2 leadership planets. So this is an emotional type of leadership. Um, and there might also be some, competition involved here. Mars and Sun are 2 fire planets. Fire in general, especially when we relate to Vedic astrology, relates to like competition and fighting, can get out of hand. So there's some deep internal fighting going on here because Venus is combust, I mentioned. I believe I mentioned, and Mars is combust, and Moon was combust when it was new. New because it was new just a couple days ago on the 19th. So basically, this struggle is deeply internal. The only planet of the 4 you can see here is the Sun. inside there is Moon, there's Mars, there's Venus. So Moon and Mars are also very like kind of rebellious, do your own thing type planets. And Mars and Venus and Moon, those are also, deeply passionate planets of the four. So there's some deep internal, passionate struggle going on here, in terms of leadership. And again, this relates to leadership itself because Mars is the ruling planet for Aries, which is again the rising sign here. Okay, so there's a deep internal transformation going on here. The other thing is that Mars, all these planets, Moon, Mars, Sun, Venus, are in what we call a Dharmasthana. So, house of duty. Okay, so this deep internal, personal and probably professional leadership, deep change going on here, um, is one about, what is my duty? What is my role? What is my place? What is my purpose in life? Yeah. And then the other thing is, not to get too far into it, but again, these four planets, it's not like they're there alone. So they have actually different aspects on it. They have an aspect of Jupiter, which is the ruling planet for the sign of Sagittarius. So that's going to bring a lot of spiritual energy here. And again, the ninth house also relates, besides relating to father and authority and government, relates to spirituality and religion. So there's going to be quite an important spiritual moment here. The other thing is that K2 is aspecting from the fifth house. K2 is a south node of the moon, very erratic, kind of like Mars, rebellious and fiery, but more of like a hidden twist, even more erratic and more rebellious, even like a separatist kind of ending type of a planet. So we're gonna have basically almost you consider it like three fire planets. That's a lot of fire. There's a lot of transformation going on here, a lot of heat. Um, and then also we have the aspect of Saturn. So the only two planets that actually aren't involved in this ninth house are Rahu, which is the 11th house of clubs, group, society, and then Mercury, which is the eighth house of deep psychology. So a lot of structural transformation. Outwardly, there's physical barriers because Saturn's aspect that, and Saturn's in part of this guy called Purva Bhadrapada, which is like relates to a funeral pyre actually. So on the surface of things, below the ground, there's a lot of deep internal transformation. On the surface, though, there's a lot of, either stagnancy, delays, obstacles, maybe even destruction going on. And now it's all about taking a unusual spiritual perspective to transform. Because clearly there's like a pressure cooker type situation going here in the ninth house. Okay, but it's calling, again, luckily this is a pretty short-lived transit because, again, these planets are going to flow through Sagittarius and then start to emerge on the other side into Capricorn, which is the 10th house of day-to-day activity mid-January. So for the next few weeks, from the solstice until, there's going to be this, deep transformation that's going on here, again, collectively. But we might also see like what this might bring, for more collective energy is this might be, all of a sudden it's like a governments or authority like, springing forward suddenly mid-January. It might seem like a whole lot of nothing's going on or even like things are, going to pot or things are going backwards on the surface. But then, things will shift mid-January. So the dasha period again, relationships changing, Saturn structural changes, delays, obstacles, physical delays, obstacles, Sun, deep transformative leadership, and then again Mercury's in the eighth house of again deep psychology. And Mercury is in a nakshatra called Jyestha, which relates to protection. So there's some sort of uh, thoughts or logic, is Mercury's thoughts, logic, and even speech related to deep transformation here, protection of self. Okay, so the moon nakshatra at this time, so moon, in the last couple of days has shifted out of this Mula spots, again, the deep transformative, farming type. And I always think of it as farming. So I don't think of it as like, bad. Some people see Mula and they start shaking their boots, I think, because Mula is pretty intense. But again, you don't get lemon trees or rose bushes or anything unless you plant some seeds in the ground. It's just a matter of, and there's only so much you can do, right? I mean, you can't control the process. You can water it and maybe fertilize it, if you want to use, pesticides or go organic or whatever, shade, add enough sun or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's some sort of inherent, sort of natural process that you can't control, right? And there's always going to be some seeds that don't make it, and you might, have some special green thumb magic that helps things to make it. But, again, if you're a true farmer, you know that it's not completely in your control, right? The transformation that's happening. So that can be, really disorienting, when you're going through this process, especially if you didn't, you sort of stumbled into it or, um, didn't go into it by choice, circumstances presented themselves where it's like, okay, it's time for you to grow. Growing pains, you could think of it, I guess. So again, this is going to be the focus right here at the, December solstice time. And then we have, again, trouble with, sun-related things. It's the Karka sun, as I mentioned. The other thing about this, pravraja yoga, or it would be called a stellium in Western astrology. It's a pretty close, kind of a close definition. They're not exactly the same, but when you get a bunch of planets in one house, you can get a stellium in Western astrology. And I don't know the additional implications of that. I'm really just a Vedic astrologer, but the other thing is that Mars, Sun, and Venus again are in this Mula nakshatra, and the star of Mula is Ketu. And then we've got on top of it Ketu aspecting. So this whole process here going on, transformative, process here in the ninth house is going to be wild. It's going to be a wild process, but it's also planting something, is going to grow something wild and unexpected. Okay, so the process and the product both, okay, have very unusual, unexpected, developments here. And then again, compass Venus and Mars. So this could also mean with Venus and Mars, again, Venus represents women and love, and Mars represents men and libido. This could be like kind of a hidden relationship or hidden passion of some kind. It doesn't have to be a person, um, but really digging deep here, but also something that's not on the surface in public or view. And again, unusual difficulties with leader, government, authority, and again, religion possibly as well. There may be some defensive speech here because Venus, or sorry, not Venus, but Mercury's in Jyestha nakshatra and its aspect in the second house of oral communication. And then Saturn is aspecting there as well. So Saturn is going to delays and obstacles there. And so this might be actually people kind of stepping back away from communicating, like taking more of a defensive. If they do speak, it might be in more of a defensive type of way. And then all these planets, are aspecting the third house, so we can't negate that. I mean, it's easy to focus on the Raja Yoga in the ninth house because it's like all, your eye naturally goes there. But, all these planets, Moon, Mars, Sun, and Venus, are all aspecting the third house. The third house represents written communications. There might be a whole lot of written communication going on, more than like face-to-face discussion, especially because Venus and Mars are combust and Moon was just combust. And again, combustion, I don't think I discussed that. Combustion is when a true planet is very close to the sun, usually within about 10 degrees. And when a true planet is, and the true planets are Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. So when those planets are close to the sun, they're basically eclipsed by the sun. You can't see them in the sky with your eyes anymore. And so what that means is a combust planet means that you don't see their external manifestations of things. Like Venus is like luxury and love and gooey gooey things and compassion, diplomacy, that sort of thing. So when Venus goes combust, you can get really intense interactions where people are sort of like they don't have a filter anymore. They don't even try to put on, their game face. Like it's just very raw and intense, and it can get out of hand, because there's no diplomacy there. So anyway, the third house represents non-oral communication, whereas the second house does. And then the third house of siblings can also be neighbors as well. So there can be a lot of things going on with like neighbors and siblings and stuff like that. And it might even be dual in nature because the third house and the ninth house are both dual signs, uh, ruled by dual signs. So third house is ruled by Gemini, which is dual air sign, and then Sagittarius in the ninth has a dual fire sign. So a lot of thoughts, a lot of actions on both sides. Yes, there's a lot there. And then again, this might be more like physical communication, like walking your talk, versus like actually speaking out loud your thoughts, or feelings, right? Um, yeah, so this might be all kind of hush hush. It might be again, this is a deep internal process. So that's kind of the energy starting off December solstice. And then if we look at March equinox, that chart now. So the day lord for the second chart here is Venus. So again, Venus is in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So there's probably some sorting, emotional sorting going on, you know, Venusian things. So there might be some, because of this deep transformation that's going on, there might be a loss of some kind of relationship. And then the dasha period, the other thing is, again, we're getting more emotional energy because in the beginning it was Moon, Venus, Mars, and Sun, and now we're getting Moon, Venus, Sun, and Saturn. Okay, so Mars was like all about initiatives and action and rebelliousness and that sort of thing. And then with Saturn, this is going to be about endings. And again, it's in the house of losses and expenditures and that sort of thing. Okay, so this is going to be the sort of relative kind of I would say fallout, of despite whatever's being planted here, which again is protected. There's always going to be some change and some endings. If you start on a whole new course in life. So the thing is, the dasha period for the second chart is Mercury, Jupiter, Jupiter, Moon. So that's also very interesting because Mercury and Jupiter are the two news planets, the two education planets, the two, thought planets, and then Mercury and Moon are the two mind planets. So there's something all about like, educating the mind and bring, news and, public and that sort of thing. And Jupiter is aspecting Mercury in the 11th house of clubs, groups, society. So this is probably going to be some sort of announcement about some new leadership initiative, that's developed from or a result of this deep transformation that's happening in December. Okay, because in the 11th house here, we have Mars, Mercury, and Rahu. So what's interesting about the second chart, it's pretty obvious. You not just have one pravraja yoga or life focus, but you have two pravraja yogas here. So you have one in the 11th house of clubs, group, society, also income, also gambling. So that's interesting. So it looks like there's probably some, unexpected gamble that's going to happen here. The reason why I'm saying unexpected gamble is that even though the sun is moved into Pisces I think it's a couple weeks before this March equinox date, we're going to have solar eclipses going on in the 5th house here and the 11th house. So there's going to be some, unexpected change with groups and, income and that sort of thing. But at the time of this chart, we have Mars and Rahu. So Rahu's an ambition planet. Mars is an initiator planet, rebellious planet. Mercury's there with like thoughts and communication, that sort of thing. Jupiter's amplifying all of this. There's going to be a lot of enthusiasm for driving, groups. And again, there's going to be this unexpected energy that comes from the eclipses here. Okay, and there's going to be something newsworthy, that comes from this. Yeah. But there's also like again like this is all about news and communication, education, that sort of thing. Could be something along the lines of marketing or getting the word out about something. Yeah. And a real big push for that, with Rahu and Mars there and Jupiter. It's like a big, like, okay, we're ready to launch, kind of thing. The moon at this time in the second chart is in Revati nakshatra. Revati nakshatra is all about traveling and hospitality. Okay. And Moon is the lord of the fourth house here, which relates to home and mother and happiness and that sort of thing. So this could be with Revati at this point. Could be, literally about traveling. There could be some troubles related to mother figure type people. But I think this is about, sort of coming to terms or coming to peace with whatever transformation has happened. Um, yeah, that's what it's looking like. The Sun nakshatra is an Uttar Bhadrapada. Uttar Bhadrapada is like the back legs of a funeral pyre. So there's still like transformation that's happened. So again, but it's like kind of after, the fires have blown through and that sort of thing. It's kind of like taking a step back, being a little bit objective, and then starting to like, put one foot in front of the other and kind of clean things up and start over again. Okay, so this is all about like containing the chaos. So again, Sun is going from deep transformation to containing chaos and bringing things together. And Moon is going, in the beginning, is sorting through things. I don't think I mentioned the Moon nakshatra in the first chart was in Purva Shada, which is all about sorting. So there's some mental, emotional sorting that's going on about this deep transformation in the first chart. And the second one, it's all about like, all right, it's time to, because of the transformation that's happened, let things go. Again, but on a, a larger level, more collective level, Sun still represents like, king or president. So this could be heads of state. And Moon and Venus, again, something emotional. And then Saturn is, can be some sort of ending. And let's see, Sun and Saturn are both, hold on, let me see, are both in Uttar Bhadrapada. So there's some, emotional, mm, release or letting go, traveling. This could be like what I was saying, like a dignitary visit. It might be that some, unfortunately, tragedy has occurred to a group. Because Saturn is, we're getting a lot of losses here. Okay. I mean, Moon is Lord of the fourth house. Venus is Lord of the second house of inner circle. Venus is the Lord of the seventh house of independent business, partnerships, and spouse. Saturn is Lord of the 10th house of day-to-day activity and reputation. Saturn is the Lord of, the 11th house of groups. And Sun is the Lord of the 5th house of children. But also, like it's Leo, it relates to Leo, which is a stage. So this could be some kind of literally like public head of state funeral. That's quite emotional. Okay. Happens about this time of the year. So more context here. So at this time in the beginning, so in the December chart, Venus and Mars are combust. In the second chart, Saturn and Mars are combust. So that's also interesting. So Mars is going to be combust for a long time. And right, like I think a day after this March equinox time, very soon after this March equinox time, Mars is going to come back online and not be combust anymore. Mars went combust at the beginning of um, November, first week of November. And it'll be combust in total for about 4 months, which is a really long time. So that means that again, Mars is a rebellious planet. It's a leadership planet. It's a, um, you know, um, erratic planet, that sort of thing. So, but all this has been underground within us. Like we haven't seen so much of that outward, bursting and combustion and kind of fire that Mars brings. Easy rider type energy. But it's been all internal. And now it's time to like again, that's all about to come to the surface. The other thing with Saturn, Saturn is combust here, and Saturn is like delays and obstacles and chronic problems, that sort of thing. So and they are both natural malefic planets. So both Saturn and Mars being combust, um, it's almost like uh, the obstacles are like not seen, or there are no physical obstacles. There might be some internal obstacles. There might be some, fear. There might be some concern. There might be some internal conflict. But at this particular moment, it's like, the path is clear forward. The other thing with Saturn and Mars, they both represent Earth and land and property. So Saturn and Mars being combust, this could be related to some sort of public issue with how would I say, like a natural disaster, like earthquake type, because this is land you can't see. And the other thing is that Mars, you can see Mars is very close to Mercury, and Mercury's retrograde. That line under Mercury means it's retrograde. So Mercury was ahead of Mars, it backed over Mars, and now once Mercury goes progressive again, it's going to go over Mars again because Mercury's a faster planet. So Mars is going to be in war with Mercury a few times, and Mars again is action and physicality, except again it's combust in this moment, and Mercury's like logic and decisions and communication stuff like that. So it's sort of like logic versus instinct, you know. The other thing is that Saturn, you can see Venus is it's a little bit out, but Saturn also like Mars, Venus went over Saturn. So Venus and Saturn were so there's going to be a bunch of wars going on, planetary wars. So there is going to be a lot of conflict, and again, some of it's going to be internal, like personal level for people, but on a collective level. But again, it looks like there's a group orientation here because we've got all these planets in a group house here, and there's going to be some losses. But also Saturn and Mars being combos, this is land you can't see, like the tectonic plates potentially. Um, yeah. So this could also be like buildings that fall down, that kind of thing. So and again, we've got two pravraja yugas, which is really wild. So there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a focus on groups, and there's going to be a focus on losses, and again, it's going to be some sort of global phenomenon here. Unfortunately, neither of these houses has much protection on it. So again, it does look like again there might be some dignitary visit to, um, like what heads of state they go to like natural disaster areas and like shake hands with people and show their support in a physical way, that kind of thing. It could be like that. And again, this can be more internal structures. Like maybe the internal structure of something that fell apart. Whether it's a building or like literally like a tectonic plate type of thing. And again, there's some ambition here because Rahu's in the 11th house to, you know, um, bring news and some kind of, activity or leadership, hands-on leadership to whatever has gone down here. Yeah. Um, but it's going to be an unusual situation because we have Rahu on. We have Rahu there, and then actually, sort of like in the first chart where Ketu basically dominated this Pravraja Yoga. In the second chart, the Pravraja Yoga that's in the 11th house here, the Mars, Mercury, and Rahu. Mars, Mercury, and Rahu, I believe, I want to say that they're all in this nakshatra called Satabhisha. Let me just check on that for a second. Hold on a second. Okay, so yes, they are. So Mars, Mercury, and Rahu, they're all in a nakshatra called Satabhisha. Satabhisha is translated as 100 healers. So this can indicate when somebody has placements in Satabhisha, it can indicate something that's difficult to heal or even diagnose or even understand what's going on. It can also indicate somebody who's actually a healer, but all three of these planets are in Satabhisha. And all three of them, in this particular case, Mars and Rahu are natural benefics, and Mars and Rahu are natural malefics, and Mercury can swing either way, be benefic or malefic, depending on what's around it. But since Mercury is with Mars and Rahu, Mercury is also a natural malefic. So you have three natural malefics in Satabhisha in the 11th house. The other thing is the star of Satabhisha is Rahu. So whereas the first chart here is, dominated, this Pravraja is dominated by Ketu. The second chart, this Pravraja is dominated by Rahu, which is more about ambition and drive and that sort of thing. So there can be a real push forward in terms of groups and that sort of thing. But it's, again, unexpected because we're going to have a solar eclipse going on here in the 11th house. Yeah. So, yeah, so I would say emotional loss of land and groups, income here, inner structure, ambition, some strange, unusual event. Um, and again, it's probably going to be multiple in nature because we have, again, now the pravraja yoga in the 11th house, what's brought in. The first house energy is brought there, eighth house energy, deep psychology, self, deep psychology, Mercury's third house, siblings, neighbors, and sixth house enemies, acute problems, and then Rahu's there. And then we have four planets in, the house of losses and expenditures. So the other thing, on top of this is that we have what's called a Sati Sati in this chart. So um, Moon and Saturn in the same house. So when Saturn transits, like in a natal chart in somebody's chart, if when Saturn transits the house before, of, and after their natal moon position, you get a 7.5 year period called Sati Sati because it takes Saturn about 2.5 years to go through a sign. So, sign before, of, and after, that's three signs by 2.5 years. That's 7.5 years. A lot of people fear Sati Sati. It's not always to be feared, but usually there's some pretty important long-term changes that happen. And the thing that does seem to be common for everybody is that there's a loss. There's usually a loss of some major support system that's been, ongoing. Because again, Saturn only comes, it takes about 29 years for Saturn to go through the whole zodiac. So whatever support system has been there for about 30 years or so, that might be lost. You know. So yeah, so again, even more confluence, or we would say indicating that there's some pretty big losses going on here. Um, and then on the third chart here, June 2026, that solstice, that's going to happen 4:24 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The actual one, again, I've oriented that day chart to Aries rising so we can compare apples to apples here with these charts. So the day lord in the third chart is Saturn. So again, losses and delays here. But again, there's some kind of restructuring going on here. And the dasha period is Sun, Mars, Venus, and Rahu. So Sun and Mars, the two leadership planets. Venus, relationships again, and Rahu is drive or lead, or drive and ambition. So Saturn and Rahu don't really change much through the next 6 months, and Sun and Mars and Venus though are. So let's see. So Mars, since it is the ruling planet for all these charts, Mars in this last chart is in the second house of inner circle and assets and that sort of thing. Okay, so there's some drive there. It's in a dharmasthana, not a dharmasthana, but an artisthana. So in the beginning, Mars is in dharmasthana, so it's all about duty, and then the last one's about artisana. So it's about rebuilding, and you can see literally Mars in the first degree of Taurus here in the last chart. And Taurus is, a fixed earth sign. So this is about building long term, initiating long term assets and long term inner circle. So clearly there's been some major losses. And by the time June rolls around, things are going to, be on the rebuilding stage. So Mars is in the second house of oral communication. Sun is in the third house of non-oral communication. So this is all about new words and actions, bringing about change. And Venus is in a pretty nice spot in June, because look at that. Venus is has what we call Digbala directional strength, so it's strong, it being in the fourth house. Fourth house relates to home, it relates to property, it relates to lineage, it relates to happiness, it relates to mom. And it's with Jupiter. Jupiter's in the its exaltation sign. So we've got the two great benefics, in the fourth house of happiness. That's pretty nice to have that going on. Okay. Uh, there is a drawback here, though, because you can see at the top I have this big black kind of, curve That's indicating what we call a papakartari yoga. Okay, so we have Mars and Saturn in either sign, in either house of the Lugna rising sign here, and they're natural malefics. So that's going to bring some, trouble going on here. Okay, and Mars and Saturn is more like they're physical land planets. So there might be physical obstacles here, even though internally there's happiness at home and with self and with lineage and that sort of thing. So there's that. Okay. So it's not all sunshine and unicorns, but at least at least internally, there's sunshine and unicorns. Okay. And usually the internal space is very important because when we feel good and we're thinking well and clearly and all this sort of thing, it helps us make, better decisions moving forward. So that's kind of nice. So by the time June, it's pretty intense, for the next 6 months, but by the time June rolls around, generally speaking, we should be in generally collectively be in a better place. Okay. Um, and the other thing is that in all three of these charts, okay, I should mention. So again, Mars is the ruling planet, and Mars is the initiator, leadership, CEO, roll your sleeves up and get things done planet. And Mars is with malefics, has malefics on it, or is with malefics in all three charts. So this might be a bit of a grind. It might be feel like, two steps forward, one step back, or one step forward, two steps back. But at least there's progress, there's an upward trend by the time June rolls around, okay, with some, stumbling blocks and obstacles along the way. But you can see Mars is with Sun and in the ninth house in the first chart, and it's got Saturn and K2 on it. So it's got three malefics on it in the first chart. In the second chart, it's got two malefics on it, Mercury and Rahu. And then in the third chart, there's one. Okay, so it's like three malefics, two malefics, one malefic. Even in terms of how much malefic energy is on Mars, that's slowly lightening up in the next 6 months. Okay, as this rebuild comes about. And what's also nice about this Jupiter and Venus is it's aspecting the 10th house of, day-to-day activity and reputation and that sort of thing. So it's going to be about nurturing and balance and harmony and, all this sort of thing. And Venus is the lord of the second house of inner circle and the seventh house of partnerships, personal and professional partnerships and way forward in life, so it's almost like this, uh, finding your new besties and that sort of thing, and then sort of skipping down, skipping down the road, with your new plan of action in hand, that sort of thing. That might be a little bit exaggerated, but compared to the first chart here, it's relatively speaking going to be more like that. And again, innovative leadership and tangible, long-standing ways. And so this is where the deep transformation, like the pain of the deep transformation, right? The planting of the seeds and the precariousness of planting the seeds in the December solstice time. Now we're starting to see some of the fruits and it's like things are stabilizing more. And it was sort of like, oh God, was it worth it? Yeah, it was probably worth it, you know. Um, so yeah, so that's the next 6 months, or Uttarayana, as the sun progresses northward. Okay, so what I was going to do now was look at the specific chart for December solstice, the Nanta of 2025. Nanta means solstice, so it can be the December solstice or the June solstice. Just to look a little bit more closely, and get like a different vibe, more closely related to the beginning time of the next 6 months. So here's a blank chart without my notes and markings and all that kind of stuff. So especially if you're a student, you can kind of look at it yourself and take a look and see what you see, and then maybe compare your notes to mine. This chart is set for 21st December 2025, 10:03 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York time. Okay, but what I would suggest, though, as a way of starting, how do you even start with a chart, right? Especially if you're new or if you're a new student. I usually just let my eye wander. Okay, I don't go into it with really heavy analysis. Yes, I am on some level looking for things, but it's like, where does my eye go? Okay, so you might just kind of loosen up the mind grip a little bit and then let your eye wander and see what you see what you pick up. All right, so, and then once you take a look at it, I would ask the question, do you notice anything, especially if you watch my new moon video, okay, the Amavasya that happened on 19th December 2025, which was just a couple days before this time. Do you notice anything related to that new moon? Okay, so I'll give you a little time here, but this is actually the opposite. This is an upside down chart, basically, for the new moon. Okay, because the new moon on December 19th was a Cancer rising. Cancer is the opposite sign. We have a Capricorn rising chart here. Again, the rising sign is the top diamond in the middle. Little 10 in the bottom corner refers to the 10th zodiac sign, which is Capricorn or Makara in Sanskrit. And directly opposite Capricorn is Cancer. So on December 19th, that new moon, again, the same time zone and location or whatever, was Cancer. So it's, and again, the 1-7 axis is all about personal relationships. So this is almost like it's kind of funny because the new moon chart that I looked at, it's all about, I titled it warning signs because there was a lot going on. And this December solstice moment is almost like it almost brings up like a he said, she said kind of moment, where this is almost like, a couple or partnership or something. And it's like, what's their perspective and then what's the opposite perspective and that sort of thing. So, and then on top of that, the Lagna nakshatra here is in Shravana, which is basically about storytelling. I was just like, wow. I mean, it's just sort of like in your face. So yeah, so this is kind of the flip side of, the new moon that happened. So if you want to check out that video, you can, but it's almost like sort of like the inside. When I was looking at this chart, especially related to the new moon, it was almost like I almost felt like a counselor therapist. It was like kind of, or like a friend or something who was friends with a couple or something, and you were sort of hearing their side of it and the other person's side of it and that sort of thing. So that's sort of interesting in and of itself. So that's the first thing I noticed, actually. But then what else? So what about the March equinox? So I went through that, and equinox in Sanskrit is Vishuva. Okay, so um, so do you notice anything related to the March equinox? Well, if you remember the March equinox, we've got two pravraja yogas, right? We've got one in the 11th house and we've got one in the 12th house. So in this chart, we've got pravraja yoga in the 12th house, which, as I already discussed, was all about losses, right? Because the 12th house is like about, uh, losses and expenditures. And then there's like, very emotional moon Venus energy here, the two emotional planets. We got Sun and Mars here, the two leadership planets. At least there's some, this might be, goodwill as well because Venus is combust, right? So loss of diplomacy. There is a little bit of protection because Jupiter is aspecting this pravraja yoga. So that's nice. But again, you've got Saturn and Ketu on this pravraja yoga as well. So it's almost like this moment in time of December solstice is foreshadowing what's to come, in March. That's kind of how I was seeing it. Okay, so we've got this pravraja yoga. The other thing we have in this chart, and again, looks like a lot of markings, but it's not. It's like maybe half of them. We've got a lot of challenge here. Okay, we've got a focus here on losses and endings in the 12th house with this pravraja yoga. Okay, there is some protection because Jupiter's aspecting its own sign, but this might even seem like a dual loss here because it's happening in Sagittarius, a dual fire sign. Okay. And then we've got Saturn aspecting it. Saturn again is on Purva Bhadrapada, cremation energy, fire energy. And we've got K2 aspecting all this, and 3 of these 4 planets are in a K2 star. So unusual, unexpected endings and that sort of thing. Okay, so we've got that going on. In addition to this, okay, we've got a Balarishta yoga. So 7 planets. Okay, there are 9 classic Jyotish planets. 7 of them are in negative houses. It's a very precarious uh, time, very fragile beginning. When somebody has a Balarishta yoga like that, they generally have a very difficult childhood. Might be physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, medically. Sometimes they don't survive. Okay. So that's even bringing more to the forefront this energy of all these planets like Sun, Venus, Mars. Venus and Mars combust, in Mula. I mean, this could literally be planting of a new relationship. It probably is both, actually, the planting of a new relationship that hasn't come to fruition yet, but also, not to be, harsh, but it could even be like the bearing of an old relationship. Like there's a transition here. That's a possibility, okay? But again, there's a very fragile moment here. And then on top of that, okay, so we've got those 2 yogas. We've got another yoga. We have a papakartari yoga. So kind of like in that last, the June solstice chart, I said there was like a papakartari yoga around the lugna, the rising sign, because we had Mars in the 2nd house, Saturn in the 12th house, and that creates barriers. Okay, we've got barriers here. We've got Rahu and natural malefic in the 2nd house, and we've got 2, well, actually 3 natural malefics. Moon is considered natural malefic here because it's so weak. It's a new moon. So Moon, Sun, and Mars, with 2 natural malefics, Saturn and Ketu on it. We have a Papakartari yoga here. So there's a focus on losses, expenditures, some sort of unusual situation, emotional losses, loss of leadership as well. Like this might be somebody who doesn't know what to do at this point. And a lot of instability because they've all just gone through this, Moon, Sun, Mars, Venus have all relatively, in the last week or 2, have gone through this Gandanta point. It's a lot of instability. So the Lugna nakshatra I mentioned, Shravana, which is related to oral tradition and storytelling. So this is going to be a historical moment, unfortunately for better or worse, like a pretty pivotal moment. And again, major transformation of self, okay, because the Lugnatia, the ruling planet for this chart is Saturn, and Saturn again is in that, Purva Bhadrapada energy. So it's like literally like deep transformation of self and physical transformation of self, even, yeah. Um, and that's also a bit precarious because Saturn, the ruling planet, has gone to a negative house, the 3rd house, which is not the most negative. Usually the 3rd house is considered to be an upachaya, so a house that, gets better over time. But Saturn's a slow moving, planet. So whatever this, you know, deep physical personal transformation is, it's going to take some time to really, move through this. Saturn is going to be in Pisces until February of 2028. But it's going to be in this, I think it's going to be another year for Saturn to be in this. Oh, no, 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 take that back. Well, Saturn, I would say, again, Saturn's going to be in Purva Bhadrapada for a little bit, and then it's going to go through Uttara Bhadrapada, which is still the funeral pod, but with more objectivity and kind of a rebuild type energy, and then it's going to be in Revati. Revati is about like hospitality and travel and that sort of thing. So there's going to be this lightness that comes, when Saturn gets to Revati, but that's going to be like a year from now. About, I don't know, I have to check on the dates, but so this is going to be a slow, almost kind of a slog of a transformation here, but a deep transformational one that's going to be lasting for the next 30 years. So yeah, this is like no joke here going on. Okay, so um, and Saturn, the ruling planet, is in 3rd house, so which is non-oral communication. So this could be like ending things, not just saying you're gonna stop or not do things, but like physically just not doing things. This could also mean like uh, almost like a physical type of depression where you're sort of moving in slow motion. It could be that. Okay. Because but Mars is aspecting Saturn here, which should generally give like a I would say Saturn and Mars together can give like an engineering energy as well as like an endurance energy, athletic energy, a workaholic energy. So there might be this workaholic type energy going on, but on the surface it looks like nothing's happening because Saturn's in Purva Bhadrapada. Internally, there's this deep transformation that's going on. So yeah. So, and also Saturn is, a planet representing anxiety. It represents skepticism, doubt, fear, um, you know, um, being kind of a loner, being kind of isolated. So literally, and then in the pravraja yoga here in the 12th house, we have Moon, which represents mother, Sun, father, Venus, spouse, Mars, sibling. I mean, this might be literally a loss of family or family overseas or in a remote place, that sort of thing. But, this person is going to feel pretty much on their own to go through this whole transformational thing. Okay, so it's a tough time, but they're still ruled by Saturn, and Saturn's about endurance. So they'll be able to slog through this, if if they choose, and again, depending on the person's personal chart. But the other thing about, the Lugnatia here, again, there is some instability, even though it's Saturn, because it's in the first degree of Pisces here. So it's Sunday. So there's some instability here of the Lugnatia, the ruling planet for the chart. And because it's the ruling planet for the chart and the Lugna here, I mean, the whole, again, there's another layer of instability here. So especially Capricorn rising people right now are really probably feeling the squeeze with all this going on. But, luckily, again, Moon and Sun, at least, and then Venus pretty soon, by mid-January, will be, uh, you know, uh, hopping up into Capricorn here. So especially the next 3 weeks, this is going to be like, crunch time. And then we'll start, Capricorn rising people will start moving forward. Okay. So I don't want to make this all doom and gloom, but at least this particular moment's like pretty tough. Okay. Um, and yeah, so this could also be, it's in, Saturn is in the third house, which is a Kamastana. So this could be literally writing people and canceling events, like you just kind of want to be on your own to deal with this stuff, personally. Um, yeah, especially with the holidays, a lot of people got all these events and stuff this time of year. So, yeah, and then the second house here, we have Rahu and Satabhisha, aspected by Jupiter. So this might actually be a lot of speech about, losses related to family and inner circle. Because again, the Saturn is the ruler not only of the Lugna but the second house here. So there's a major shakeup, foundational shakeup, and especially ideologically related to inner circle, family, friends, parents, grandparents, whoever's close to you. Rahu's there, so there's some ambition to talk. But Rahu also will give it might give a bit of a smokescreen, like it might be difficult to talk. Um, even though there's some drive there, and Jupiter's aspecting that house as well. And Jupiter represents speech, but again, it looks like it might be, even though there's a drive or desire to speak, it might be difficult to do so, or it might actually be difficult to actually change anything by speaking about it because of the current alignment. The third house here, again, issues with communication. This might be cold or ending words. There's not going to be a lot of um, this might be, just like not texting or not emailing or that sort of thing. Or if you do, it's like limited communication or, thanks, but I'm not coming, and that kind of thing. But there's, I would say, an inner destructive and transformational time. The other thing is that I think the thoughts are, fairly explosive and, going on here. The fourth house, for example, the ruler of that is Mars, combats Mars and Mula, aspected by K2. That's a very explosive energy. And the fourth house is home. The fourth house is lineage. The fourth house is happiness, mother, that sort of thing. So, um, So this could literally be somebody who is, um, especially if we're bringing this idea of he said, she said into this. This might be like if there was a partner and they were living together, this is the partner that probably left that home. They might be trying to grapple with trying to retain some sort of assets because of this Rahu Jupiter combination in the second house. Trying to talk, trying to discuss, but without probably much help in that direction. The other thing is that we've got the fifth house here, that's intellect. The lord of that is Venus. And Venus is Sunday and it's in Mula. So that's a pretty destructive, and it's combust. So it might be like not really getting great advice or advice about how to dissolve a partnership, potentially. And that might have just happened because the lord of the seventh house, Moon, again, we just had an Amavasya. So it's like weak, and it's in the 12th house, and it's with natural malefics, and it was in Mula. So, again, this doesn't mean it's like over for everybody because everybody has a different chart. But um, if it's not over, this might be like a serious shift or a change in the dynamic, or like a pretty important event where things kind of blew up or imploded, exploded, either way, maybe both. Um, and then also the eighth house here of deep psychology, the lord of that is Sun, and Sun is in Mula. Again, that's a destructive transformational energy, and Ketu's there. So, and Ketu is in Purva Phalguni, which is all about like the finer things of life. It's symbolized by a hammock bed, but it's also symbolized by a marital bed. So again, if we're looking at this as a transit chart, this might be somebody who's, considering ending a relationship, maybe one that's like pretty um, deep and long lasting, like literally a marriage. It could be. So at least at this transit time, but this would also be somebody who's generally, very innovative thinker and that sort of thing. But again, if we're looking at this as a transit chart, it might be like if it's not over, they might be considering that it's over, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a pretty tough moment. All right, so I think now, I think the next slide here is looking through house by house a little bit more in depth. Okay, so on the left here, we have the solstice chart with all the different aspects and everything. Again, the time here is December 21st, 2025, 10:03 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York time. The day lord is Sun, and again, the Hurrah lord is Mercury. So Mercury, again, is protecting here, but Mercury's in the 11th house. So, Mercury is the 11th house again is income, but also clubs, groups, and society. So this could be somebody who's trying to protect their reputation or protect their income. Like maybe if this is a business that blew up, or business partners that blew, business partnership that blew up or is on the skids, they're trying to again maintain their assets and their income so they're not financially devastated, even though emotionally they're devastated. That's pretty clear here. The dasha period is Venus, Saturn, Sun. So Venus and Sun again are in Mula, and Venus is combust. So there's no diplomacy. It's like all of a sudden, the raw truth, has reared its ugly head, in terms of what's been going on, in terms of some kind of relationship dynamic that's been going on for a while. And Saturn again, that literal physical transformation and physical devastation. And then Sun is this new leadership, transforming leadership. Okay. And then the Venus, Saturn, Sun dasha period is going to switch to Venus, Saturn, Moon on January 13th, which is about the time when Sun and Venus are going to shift into Capricorn. So again, the next 3 weeks are going to be pretty tough, and it's going to become more of a I would say the first part here is going to be more about leadership and, reviewing purpose and direction and, that sort of thing. And the second part, once it shifts to Venus, Saturn, Moon, it's going to be more about, feeling the loss, because right now it's probably a little bit more of a shock moment where you're not completely feeling it, but things will unroll and unravel. But there might be, again, depending on somebody's, um, chart. For some people, this might be like a final ending. For other people, when Venus and Sun roll into Capricorn, they're going to roll into the nakshatra of Uttarayana, which is a sudden piercing victory. So it might seem like all hope is lost here, but then by the time mid-January rolls around, it might be like, oh, we're suddenly talking. Um, a little bit. The thing is, Venus is combust, and Venus is going to be combust until mid February. So at least there might be some support here. But again, it's like I mentioned, a few months ago when I talked about it, probably I think I talked about it in my November transits video. Venus and Mars being combust at the same time, that's a pretty tough time for relationships. It's kind of a make it or break it type of moment where either they do the deep transformation that's going to relaunch the relationship with a better dynamic, or it's like, that's it, we're done, kind of thing. So it's a precarious time, as we've been seeing. The Lugna nakshatra again is in Shravana, so there's some storytelling. Usually that's like especially stories. Like stories have this sort of like sticking, quality to them. Stories that are passed on and that sort of thing. So this is about legacy, and again, like important pivotal moment. Moon nakshatra is in Purva Shada, so emotional sorting. Sun nakshatra, end to long-term issues. Because the other thing is that the Sun is the ruler of the eighth house here of deep psychology. And so the eighth house is, long-term chronic problems, and it's gone to the 12th house. So it might be like, okay, we've been trying to make this work. We've been slogging through this, trying to make this work. It's not working. It's finally just time to like cut our losses and move on. It might be that kind of thing. Or again, depending on somebody's chart, it might be like, is this really worth fighting for? You know? And then that probably depends on individual charts, but yeah, it's kind of something like whether people break up completely, for good, or if they come back together. This is probably going to be one of those landmark moments in a relationship. Um, and about this time again, we've got all these holidays going on: Hanukkah, Christmas, Yule. And those things tend to symbolize, like Hanukkah is all about lights and miracles, and Christmas about birth and also miracles and light as well, I would say, with the birth of Jesus. And then Yule is kind of more of the pagan version, right? So like nature and cycles and stuff like that. So um, these sorts of energies are playing out where it's sort of like, it's, especially in the northern hemisphere, December solstice is, the darkest days, the shortest days, or, it's sort of like, naturally time to go inward, naturally time to hibernate, and consider, directions moving forward, new directions moving forward. So now what I was going to do is just go through house by house so we get a little bit more information, but I think you got a general vibe here. Again, about the next 6 months of Uttarayana, and then the specific December solstice by Ayananta. So the Lugna, again, is Capricorn, Makara, movable earth sign. So there's going to be a lot of activity here. But again, the activity is about ending things and transforming things, because Saturn, the ruling planet, is in this Purva Bhadrapada energy. This could also be like a self-sabotage type of energy, frankly. Somebody who's, I guess, what I was going to say, which sounds maybe a little bit harsh, is actually maybe somebody who digs their own grave. You know, yeah. Because again, Saturn is in Purva Bhadrapada, but it was in Purva Bhadrapada back in Aquarius, because Saturn just shifted into Pisces at the end of March of this year. So it's been in Pisces, for 8 months or so. But Saturn's in Purva Bhadrapada and in the second house, though. So the orientation of Saturn, when it was in the tail end of Aquarius, was actually about, you know, uh, wealth building. It was an artisana. Now it's in a kamastana. So it's like, now it's about, kind of destruction of wealth. Before it was about destruction of wealth, now it's about destruction of happiness and enjoyment and that sort of thing. So again, this person might seem fairly pressed or inactive externally, but internally there's a lot going on. Yeah. So many actions, speaking, communication, because the other thing is Saturn, the Lord of the second house, has gone 2 houses away. So there's a lot of speaking, but to what effect? It doesn't look like it's helping much. With inner circle, friends, and again, there's no planets in the Kendras here, the core, 4 houses in the middle. So this might be somebody who doesn't feel like they have much direction or orientation. They're sort of flailing and floating. And the Lagnesha, again, is a Sunday Saturn Purva Bhadrapada aspected by combust Mars and Mula. So again, doing things in kind of a mechanical way, physical way, detaching. There's probably some hidden anger here, mixed emotions, devastated self, family, siblings, all these people, again, are involved here. So it's not just affecting this Capricorn person, but, a whole load of people. Looks like there's some, legal issues as well. Because some of this Rahu Jupiter stuff in the second house is probably getting, sorting through legal things or trying to, retain assets, legally as much as they can. The partner is going to be in more protective, defensive mode. Uh, and probably in shock, I would say, because Mars is aspecting the seventh house here, but Mars is debilitated in Cancer. But Cancer is a movable water sign. So Capricorn's movable Earth, they're going to be doing things physically, and the Cancer person's going to be feeling things. There's going to be a lot of internal churning because Mars is combust. Yeah. But Moon again just went through Mula. Now it's going through Purva. So it's doing its thing. It's shifting pretty quickly here. Um, but I would say both people, like again, if this was a couple, both sides are feeling the pain here. It's not like one person's like, "Woo, yay, I'm finally free." They're both pretty upset about what's going on here. And again, this person with the Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada, they might be quite sad and lonely and being kind of stoic. Like not showing because they're Saturn. They're like the opposite. Moon is usually very expressive, whereas Saturn's very contained or reserved typically. But again, we've got a bunch of yogas here. We've got the pravraja yoga, focus yoga in the 12th house. Balarishta yoga is 7 out of 9 planets in negative houses, fragile beginnings, papakartari, big obstacles, overhead burdens, gajakesari, networking. So again, I'm not surprised networking's here because again, we have all these family related planets in the 6th house of acute problems and the 12th house of, losses, expenditures. Chandra-mangala yoga, property and wealth. Yeah, that's definitely on the table here. Mongolic problems with relationships, solar and lunar yogas. Excuse me. Some support because of Mercury, but I don't think there's much here. But, again, trying to be sort of logical about this is, and do things in a ordered way, maybe, helping to sort through this emotional turmoil that's going on. The chidra grahas, so planets of vulnerability, Venus and Mars. Well, there you go. There you go. Men and women, relationships and both being combust, so not being seen. And then Saturn twice over. So again, this might be somebody who's got, again, self-destructive tendencies. And especially when, the relationship isn't, looking so great on the outside, and it's going through a deep transformational time, which could potentially be a permanent loss. It's everybody's chart's gonna be a little bit different here, but end of a relation, internal fight, and also property is involved here. The yogi is Ketu, so this is doing things in an alternative way. That's going to bring wealth. Avayogi Rahu, like being, kind of greedy and egotistical, is going to work against somebody in this with this kind of chart. A duplicate yogis is Jupiter, so being fair, balanced, generous, equitable, even equanimity. That might be a little bit challenged right now, but that's what's going to help. So it's kind of better off letting go and being fair than being an ego and grabbing whatever you can. When some people, go through the end of relationships, they just sort of grab whatever, and sometimes just, like what they talk about, like revenge wardrobes and things like that. It's like, everybody's got their own way of doing it, but that kind of stuff in this kind of chart at this moment is not the way to go. It's not the advice. So, second house here, second lord is again a bhavat, bhavam, Sundi, Saturn. A lot of communication, but again, about endings or not, and Rahu's in Satabhisha, so there might be again like ambition towards preserving things, but to no avail, at least not at this moment. Um, the notions of inner circle and assets crumbling, trying to scrape up what you can, ambitious attempt to speak, going back and forth, but there could be irreconcilable differences or problems at the moment. But again, this is a fairly short-lived transit in terms of Moon, Sun, Venus, Mars, but Rahu, Saturn are going to be here for a while. So even though it's a really tough moment, probably for everybody, because everybody's going to be feeling this kind of movement, Saturn is a long, a slow-moving planet, and it's going to be going through this. It's been going through Purva Bhadrapada, and then it's still got a ways to go, and then going to go through Uttar Bhadrapada. You know, um, I would say again, probably at least a year for the Capricorn person to really feel like they've moved into a better space. Um, So what else? Yeah, third house here. Third house lord is Jupiter. Saturn is aspected by Mars. So again, this might be leaving, siblings, friends, neighbors, going back and forth. This could literally be moving. Like I said, this is probably, if this is a partnership, this is probably the person who left the home. Physical endings, declining invitations, for the holidays and stuff. They might be just like staying to themselves. Then the fourth house here, fourth house lord of the compass, Mars and Mula, aspected by Ketu and Purva Phalguni. This is like an implosive energy here. Loss of home, happiness, lineage, education, if it's not like a personal relationship. Um, it might feel like things physically started evaporating again, beginning of November, early part of November, because November 7th is when Mars went combust. So physical things and initiatives and actions and things like that really just went evaporated. So this could also be like sleeping apart. The fourth house is related to midnight, um, and sleeping apart, it might be physically, but also emotionally as well. So even if people are still in the same room, it could be one or the other, you know, or both. So on this slide, I've got notes for the other houses. So all the stuff on the left is the same, and then I've got notes for the other houses. So the fifth house here, fifth house lord is Venus. It's in Mula, aspected by Saturn and Mercury and Jyotish. So some advice, to end romance potentially. Fifth house is romance, logical decisions, protecting children, all that's on board here. Like if part of what needs to be worked out legally is like, how to take care of children financially or the scheduling and all that kind of stuff. That's all kind of being talked about here, or getting advice about that kind of stuff, how to work that out logistically. To protect the children. The sixth house here, sixth house lord is a bhavat, bhavam, Mercury, Jupiter's in Punarvasu, aspected by Moon, Sun, Venus, Mars. So this is a daily routines, totally like upended. The third house is acute issues, a lot of those. Sixth house is also enemies. So, now it's about like figuring, now you see like when something like this goes down, you find out who's really with who, like who the people are taking sides essentially is what I'm seeing here. Especially because it's, a dual sign. So people are going to be lining up, like, are they going to take the Cancer side or the Capricorn side, that kind of thing. This could also be like children going back and forth because Jupiter's there to represent children. So legal issues, but also issues related to children if children are involved. Seventh house Lord is this new moon in Purva, so the partner's also sorting out their issues. But it seems like the Cancer person is seeing this or feeling this more as like an acute problem because again, if you spin this chart to Cancer, this pravraja yoga is in their sixth house of acute problems. Whereas for the Capricorn person, this is happening in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. But either way, I mean, basically, this whole pravraja yoga thing is on the 6-12 axis. It's mirrored for both, the Cancer person and the Capricorn person. So, but they might see this as more of a temporary, kind of situation. But that's also the nature of Cancer, because they're ruled by the moon, so they're going to move quickly. And, like some people consider moon people to be more fickle because, again, they move so fast in the sky, whereas Saturn's the opposite. You've got the fastest moving planet versus the slowest moving planet. I mean, that's like just their relationship with time is very different. So, but yeah, I mean, but again, the Cancer person, seventh, whatever it is, whether it's independent business, partnerships, way forward in life, with this Mars. And the thing is, Mars is going to be aspecting Cancer where it's debilitated, not only as it moves through Sagittarius, but even as it moves through Capricorn. So it's going to take some time, for this internal troubled situation to calm down, even for the Cancer person or partners or business or whatever. It's not going to resolve overnight. Let's put it that way. At least probably a few weeks or months. Um, and again, looks like the Cancer person might be traveling, or maybe they're off visiting family, whereas the Capricorn person's like, no, I'm just gonna stay at home and chill out, on my own, kind of thing. The eighth house lord is Sun and Mula, Ketu and Purva Phalguni. So again, end of good times. Rock to the core, end of chronic problems. Redirect. This is all about redirect because the sun, again, I mentioned it represents soul and purpose and health. So this is all about like redirecting, you know, uh, oneself in a deep way. And, you know, sometimes these things, like sometimes everything blows up and it basically gives you a blank slate. And that's what I'm seeing here is that even though there's like, clearly devastation and it's difficult and emotional issues and relationships, I mean, all that's going on for sure. But, some people pray for a blank slate. Sometimes, again, like in this kind of moment, it's probably foisted upon you and not welcome. But if that perspective can shift to, okay, knowing what I know now as my 30-year-old self or 40-year-old self or 60-year-old self, and I get a chance to start over, uh, what would I do? What would I do differently moving forward? So, then the ninth house here, the Lord is Mercury. That's in Jyestha. So again, this is protection of some sort, aspected by Saturn. So this might be the end of a religious union. I was going to say, like sorting through things, through authority, like legally potentially. Um, but that's also shifting because at the end of December, Mercury is going to be in Mula as well. So then whatever protective energy is left here, like logically trying to protect, I think like kind of, I was going to say cling on. I don't know if it's necessarily cling on, but like logically try to like, you know, um, protect oneself and salvage what you can. At some point, it's all, it's past the time for that. So at the end of December, Mercury's moving out of Jyestha and the protective energy into Mula. There will actually be a little bit more protection though, because once Mercury moves into uh, Sagittarius, you're going to have a party of arts and exchange of houses between Jupiter and Mercury. So Mercury is going to protect the sixth house, and Jupiter is going to protect the 12th house. Okay, that doesn't mean all this stuff is going to stop, but there'll at least be a little bit of grace moving forward, some protection so it all doesn't completely go down the drain. Then the 10th house here, the Lord is a combus Venus and Mula. So again, a lot of, daily activity changes aspected by Jupiter. So there's actions. This might be trying to be fair in actions and reputation, protect the reputation a bit. Trying to outwardly maintain an equilibrium, or demeanor. But on the surface, it may seem that way. But like, there's a lot of hiding and pain here, I'd say. This is going to feel like somebody got the, ground below them, what do they call it? What's the phrase? The ground below them shaken up, or, the rug pulled out from under them. That's the phrase. Yeah, the rug pulled out from under them. But again, there's potentially a new slate here. But there's clearly emotional turmoil. But again, this is a Saturn ruled person. Generally speaking, Saturn ruled people are not the most expressive, they're usually a bit reserved. Especially when you have Venus and Mars combust and Moon combust. I mean, those emotions are going to be on like serious lockdown at this particular time. You'd be like, do they see or feel anything? It might be like, do they see or feel anything? Do they even care? They're sort of dealing with things mechanically, practically, but what's really going on? Well, what's really going on is they're devastated, actually. So, no doubt about that. The 11th house Lord is a combust Mars. So again, and Mercury, is in Jyestha protective energy. So this might also be like friends, colleagues, income, evaporating potentially, or at least not seen. So again, this is kind of goes along with this Saturn in the third house of like maybe just canceling plans, holiday plans, and staying on their own kind of thing, doing their own thing. Then the 12th house here again, the Lord is Jupiter aspect zone, which again does provide some protection. Luckily, Sun, Moon, Mars, Venus, all these people, mother, father, siblings, spouse, losses, expenditures, maybe they're traveling away on retreat, whatever. And then we've got Saturn and K2 aspecting here as well. So there's some spiritual protection, but retreat, rebalancing, family travel, remote loss, trying to transform and figure out how to lead oneself again, lead life again. And again, that will come because, again, these fire planets, Sun and Mars, starting mid-January, they're going to be aspecting the fourth or the seventh house of path forward. So for the time being, it's more about hunkering down and contemplating and giving this a little time to work itself out in terms of the next steps forward. And then again, there can be some really deep insights here because Mula's a deep, again, it's roots, so especially when somebody has like Moon and Mula, they tend to be a very deep thinker. So whatever transformation's happening here, it's not like a, fly by night kind of thing. This is like a real deep, uprooting of emotionally and practically about how to, move forward and do things. But at the current time, it might be sort of a loss for words and actions in terms of how to approach this, you know. Yeah. So anyway, a pretty intense time, but luckily, a fairly short-lived cycle. This is a few weeks and months versus like, years or decades and that sort of thing. So yeah. So, again, thanks so much everybody for stopping by and listening to one of my talks and also all the support you give my work in the channel. It's I just really appreciate so much what Jyotish has brought to my life. And I really appreciate being able to share this with others. And know that it's helping people out there. So thank you all for that. Your comments and likes and shares and, feedback. Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting and wild and amazing ride. So thanks for all of that. Again, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous birth charts, check out my birth charts archive list 2025 video. I do offer individual birth chart readings, and again, I'm offering that intro Vedic astrology class in January, so that's right around the corner. For either of those things, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, as well as yoga and homeopathic and naturopathic medicine. So the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. So greatest blessings to you during Uttarayana and the solstice. And yeah, as always, I hope you found the talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.